Okay, so we're going to get started. Erev Tov, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Sukkah. You are in our back garden, and I'll explain more about what a Sukkah is and what we are sitting in. I'm Rabbi Rachel Gurevitz of Congregation B'nai Shalom in Westborough, and with me is Rabbi Suri Krieger of B'nai Or Jewish Renewal Community of Greater Boston, and this is our Sukkah. You are joining us, all of our partners from across the community of many different faiths and backgrounds. You are joining us on what is the eve of the beginning of our festival of Sukkot. So we have a good number of congregants from our community, from B'nai Shalom, who are with us also this evening to celebrate the festival. So we're going to jump right in because our presentational time is limited tonight. We want to make sure that there's some time for Q&A and also plenty of time for conversation between all of you in as part of our program this evening. Our festivals, including Shabbat, the Sabbath, always begin at nightfall, at sundown. And that is because in the book of Genesis, when it talks about the days of creation, each day it says it was evening, then it was morning, the first day. And so in Jewish time, the evening, sundown, is when the calendar day turns over. We begin all of our festivals, including the Sabbath, with the lighting of candles to usher in the festival. Even though it technically happens when sundown takes place, we have to take it in. We have to sanctify time through words and ritual. So Rabbi Suri is going to lead us in the festival candle lighting, and I'm going to screen share so that everyone can see the words that we are singing and sharing this evening.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Shabbat v'chag HaSukkot.
Amen. We praise you, eternal our God, sovereign of the universe. You've made us holy with your mitzvot, your commandments, and have commanded us to kindle the lights of Shabbat and Yom Tov. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehechianu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh. We praise you, eternal our God, sovereign of the universe. You've given us life, sustained us, and enabled us to reach this season. We also sanctify time with a ritual called kiddush. It is made over a cup, usually of wine, but it can be the produce of grapes. It could also be grape juice. And for people who don't have wine or grape juice, it could be any other liquid. But we are going to sanctify this holy time and this festival of Sukkot with this ritual.
Just knock the candle over. Vayi erev vayi boker yom hashishi Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol am v'ramamanu mikol lashon v'kiddushanu b'mitzvotav Vatiten lanu Adonai Eloheinu v'hava Shabbat u'mnucha mo'adim l'simcha chagim uzmanim l'sasom et yom haShabbat hazeh v'et yom chag HaSukkot hazeh zman simchatenu mikra kodesh zecher l'tziat Mitzrayim kivanu v'chata Yotanu kidashta mikol ha'amim v'shabbat u'moadei kadshecha v'simcha uv'sasaon inchaltanu Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh ha'shabbat v'Yisrael v'hazmanim. L'chaim.
L'chaim. And just before we continue, I'm going to just do a quick settings check. I realized Did not move to Ethernet. There we go. I'll just make sure we don't have dodgy internet this evening. Okay, moving on. This festival is about dwelling in a sukkah. We are in our sukkah, which we have built in our back garden. These are pictures of other kinds of sukkot. A sukkah is a temporary dwelling. It is put up just for the length of this holiday, this 8 days, this week of the festival. And the sukkah has to have at least 3 sides. It has to have greenery over its roof, as you can see we have on ours. The greenery has to be such that it's not completely covering the roof. The natural elements are meant to be able to come in, and we're meant to be able to look through the roof and see the sky and see the stars. The sukkah is a symbol of a lot of different things. Historically, its origins are probably very practical, because this is the festival that celebrates the end of a harvest season. And during harvest time, many hands were needed. Everything was done by hand, and temporary booths were likely put up on the edge of the fields for those extra workers to have shelter at night. And when the harvest was over, they threw a big party. And that's why in ancient times, Sukkot was actually probably one of the biggest, most significant holidays in what became the Jewish calendar. Later on, there were added layers of story added to this symbolism, remembering that when we were brought out of slavery in Egypt, we wandered through the wilderness for 40 years. And so we were living in temporary dwellings then, tents that we had to put up and bring down as we traveled through the wilderness. Then we add more layers. There are mystical layers. The rabbinic commentaries add even more. And we get to contemporary times where these themes of vulnerability to the elements, of recognizing the impermanence of life. They get turned also as we think about our obligation to others. So in more modern times, this festival of the Sukkot is a time when we think about those who are homeless, sometimes those who are refugees. Sometimes our focus has been on environmental change and our obligation to our environment as we become more aware of it when we are meant to have our meals and even potentially sleep in our sukkah, becoming more aware of the natural elements around us. This is the blessing that we say for spending time sitting and being in the sukkah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu leishev b'sukkah. Blessed are you, eternal our God, ruler of the universe, who hallows us with your mitzvot and gives us the mitzvah, which means commandment, of dwelling in the sukkah.
Amen.
One of our traditions, which is what gave rise to the idea of making this a Connections in Faith event, is that we invite guests into the sukkah. There is the tradition of obviously of inviting friends, of having meals, of singing songs, of doing things together in the sukkah. And in the midst of this pandemic, obviously this year we could not bring people in real physical presence into our sukkah. But that's why we have invited you all to join us in this digital sukkah. But there's also a tradition of inviting in spiritual ancestors. And remember that, because that's going to be something that you'll have an opportunity to do a little bit later this evening. Traditionally, these spiritual ancestors, known as the Ushpizin, which is an Aramaic word, when our tradition was written by men, a patriarchal system when rabbis were all men, were the patriarchs of our tradition. This picture shows Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, Moses, Aaron, and David. But in more recent times, the women have been welcomed. This was made a number of years ago by an organization that was all about lifting up and raising up the story of women in our tradition. This poster depicts Deborah, the prophet, Miriam, Sarah, Hannah, Huldah, the prophetess that's mentioned in the Book of Kings, Abigail, and Esther, all characters from our Hebrew Bible, and we'll say more about the Bible in a little while. We also have this rather peculiar ritual that is associated with Sukkot. What you see here is a picture of lulav and etrog. There are 4 species here. 3 types of leafy green. The lulav is a palm leaf branch. There is myrtle, which are small little fragrant leaves. There are willow leaves, which are longer, non-fragrant leaves. And what looks like a lemon is in fact, can I just take that a little closer? Is in fact not a lemon, it's a larger, lumpier item. It is called an etrog. It is a kind of citron. It's quite unpleasant if you bite into it, but it's very fragrant, and the skin and even the insides can be used afterwards for cakes and jams and things of that nature. If you shake the leaves, it's a little bit like the sound of rain. And we think that what we have here actually is very ancient. It is perhaps a kind of ancient pagan feeling rain dance, because this time of year in the land of Israel is when the season begins to change after the harvest, usually just after Sukkot. Were it not for climate change, it would be the beginning of the rainy season, and they need rain to come and replenish the land for the next season's harvest to be successful. And in fact, we add to our liturgy words of prayer to pray for rain at this time of year, and we shake these items all together in 4 directions and up and down, symbolizing God is everywhere. But we're also, it's really kind of a fertility symbol as well that we're bringing together. So later on, these symbols were seen as representatives of praying to God with one's whole body. The heart is the etrog, the lulav is the spine, the eyes, the myrtle, the lips, the leaves of the willow. And there are other symbolisms as well. But we're going to say the blessing for waving lulav and etrog, and then Suri is going to demonstrate.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al netilat lulav. And I'm going to shake it in 6 different directions, indicating the 6 corners of the universe. You might be saying 6? Yes, north, south, east, west, up and down to the heavens and to the earth. And right after I do it, I turn the etrog upside down, hold them together, and bring it towards my heart.
Amen. Thank you. We have one more thing we're going to do as part of this opening ritual of welcoming in this festival. It's traditional to sing a series from the book of Psalms that are known as the Hallel Psalms. And these probably have very ancient roots because this festival, when the temple stood in Jerusalem, was one of 3 pilgrimage festivals in a year. 3 times when people were meant to bring their harvests, their produce, and bring some of it to the temple. The priests depended on this to eat because they didn't have land of their own, and also portions were given to the most vulnerable, to the widows and the orphans and to the poor. And when the temple stood, this festival of Sukkot was the largest festival of all. It's why we call it Zaman Simchatenu, the time of our rejoicing, because it was a very joyful, happy festival. And as people brought their offerings up to the temple, the priests would be on the steps leading up, and they would be singing. There was choruses. They would be singing these psalms to greet people. We're just going to sing one, just as a little taste. We're not going to do it to a tune that they would have used back then, because some of you might recognize the tune that we are going to use tonight. And we wanted to do something that perhaps more of you could join in. So you'll have to stay on mute, but I'm going to invite you, after I do the blessing for Hallel, I'm going to invite you to join in with 3 words in Hebrew, Ki le'olam chasto, which means God's love endures forever. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu l'kro et ha'Hallel.
Use the tune that Harry Belafonte used for this psalm. Hopefully you'll recognize it. Hodu Adonai ki tov,
Ki le'olam chasto,
Adonai ki tov,
Ki le'olam
chasto,
Yomana Yisrael,
Ki le'olam
chasto,
Yomana Yisrael.
Ki le'olam, le'olam chasto. Ki le'olam, chasto. Ki le'olam, chasto.
Yomana behet Aharon.
Ki le'olam, chasto.
Yomru Nayir e Adonai.
Ki le'olam, chasto.
Ki le'olam chasto.
Ki le'olam, chasto. Ki le'olam,
Le'olam chasto.
ki le'olam, chasto.
Le'olam chasto. Daylight come and me one go home.
Toda Rabba. Thank you, Suri, for joining with me and helping me with the rituals tonight. She's now going to go join another screen upstairs, and I am going to transition us to Judaism, an introduction to Judaism in 15 minutes, which is why it's a taster menu. It's a tall order. I'm going to scratch the surface, but I'm going to try and leave 12 to 15 minutes for a Q&A so that if there's things you want to know more about or need clarity on, you can ask me. Okay, so let's start with God, because that's a biggie. God, place your image here. In Jewish tradition, there is no image of God. God is everything, it's unity. The idea of God actually evolves in our writings over the centuries. If you read just the Bible, you're going to get a version of God that's only a very small slice of all the ways that Jews think about and talk about God. Often in the Bible, God is referred to as he, but God has no gender. Probably the best reference to describing God is when Moses is at the burning bush and asks, who shall I say has sent me when I go to Pharaoh? And the answer is, Ehyeh asher ehyeh, I will be that which I will be. And the words here, the 4 letters of Hebrew that are most often used to depict God's name, Yud He Vav He, are a kind of combination of the verb to be in past, present, and future. So often in progressive communities, when we want to avoid using gender for God, we'll call God the eternal, because that is past, present, and future. When it comes to what are our holy texts, many people have heard of the Torah. The Torah is a physical object, the scroll that you see here depicted. It is a handwritten scroll, and it contains the books of the Bible that are more commonly known in secular language as Genesis through Deuteronomy. Those are not the Hebrew names of the books. Our books are just named for like the opening words of each of the books of the Bible. So in Hebrew, they are Bereshit, Shemot, Vayikra, Bamidbar, and Devarim. But the Torah is not the totality of the canon of holy books for Judaism. After Torah, the books continue in a collection known as the Nevi'im, which are the books of prophets. And beyond that is Ketuvim, which are the writings, which have an assembly of other books such as Psalms and Proverbs, Esther, Lamentations, Ecclesiastes, Chronicles, books like that. And if you take the first letter of each of these sections, Torah, Nevi'im, and Ketuvim, you get Tanakh. So sometimes you'll hear Jews talk about the Tanakh as meaning the whole of the Hebrew canon. That's what we start with. But you cannot really get a good sense of what Judaism is today, how it is actually practiced, just by reading these biblical books, certainly not by reading the Torah, because the Torah describes who we were as an ancient civilization, an assembly of tribes living in a very specific time and place. And our tradition has been one with a rich history of interpretation, starting very early on, probably at least 200 years BCE. When I say BCE, that's before Common Era, so before 0. And the most famous collection of rabbinic writings that is the basis for this method of interpretation is the Talmud. The Talmud represents conversations between rabbis from about 200 BCE through to around about 500 CE. And there are layers upon layers, which is why you see in this picture here that there's a central piece, which is what was written from about 0 to 500. And then there are other layers of commentaries around the edges and then further around the edges. There are many, many volumes of Talmud, and this is just the beginning of our interpretive tradition. Revelation. Revelation in Jewish tradition is about a partnership, a covenant, a brit in Hebrew, an agreement between humans and God. And this covenant actually happens several times. The first covenant is the covenant of the rainbow, and that is a covenant between God and all of humanity. Later on, God reveals himself, God's self, to Moses in the burning bush, and gives Moses that mission of freeing the children of Israel, the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Jacob had 12 sons, and the tradition says that these are the origins of the 12 tribes of the Jewish people, and we are descended from these tribes. But probably the most significant revelation for us is at Mount Sinai, because that is not a moment of connection between God and one individual. It is meant to be a connection between God and all of the people who were at the mountain witnessing this moment of revelation. And that is what sets the covenant between God and the Jewish people. One thing I didn't say before when I was talking about God is that in biblical times, we see in our own text that initially when we talk about God and the God of Israel, this is at a time when every people and every land had their own God. So the other Canaanite tribes had their own gods that they worshipped. And initially, the God of Israel was just that, the God of Israel. The idea of that God being the fact that there's only one God in existence is actually an idea that evolves and comes to us later on. So the idea of this covenant being between God and the Jewish people does not really imply some kind of specialness. It's more about this is our specific path through the laws that were set down as to how we are meant to connect to God through ritual and through our behavior, and how we are meant to connect to each other through our ethics and morals and the way we treat each other. And that's why so much of our Torah and our tradition is about laws of how we are meant to practice. Okay. 7 minutes left. The Jewish year. The Jewish year is filled with festivals. Right now, we're in the crazy months. This month starts with the Jewish New Year, which I'll come to in a moment. We have 4 festivals in the space of a month. This is our High Holy Day period. The month immediately after this month is over has no festivals at all. It's called the Rabbi's Recovery Month. And then we'll have others. I'm not going to be able to get to them all, but what I will tell you is about the cycle of the Jewish year is that we follow the lunar calendar. So our months are slightly shorter than the secular calendar, but unlike our Muslim brothers and sisters, it's not a pure lunar calendar. You'll be aware that in Islam, for example, the month of Ramadan, different over several decades will travel the entire calendar. Sometimes it's in the summer, sometimes it's in the winter. Our primary festivals, I mentioned 3 pilgrimage festivals, they all have their origins in agricultural cycles and in therefore the seasons. And so our festivals have to stay in alignment with the seasons. So what that means is like once every 17 years, not once, I think 3 or 4 times every 17 years, we throw in a leap month, and that gets us back in alignment. So our festivals will travel a space of about 3.5 weeks. You'll have a few years where they get earlier and earlier, from the end of September to the beginning of September, for example, for our High Holy Days, and then they'll get pushed back to the end of the month when we add a leap month to get back in alignment with the seasons. So we have just celebrated Rosh HaShanah and Yom Kippur. This is the Jewish New Year and the Day of Atonement. Our Jewish New Year is not like the secular New Year. It is not a time where we watch the ball in New York, in Times Square and have a big party. It is a time of spiritually looking back on the year that's just come to an end, looking at our mistakes and the ways we have lost our connection with each other and with God. And we atone, we ask forgiveness, both of God, and we also try and make amends with people we may have hurt. It is celebrated also with apples dipped in honey as one of the symbolic foods to symbolize wishing that the year ahead will be a sweet new year. And we try and make commitments to sort of try and do better in the year to come. The shofar, the ram's horn, is sounded, an ancient announcing tool, a kind of wake-up sound that has a series of blasts connected to it that announce the new year. And that's a very important symbol for us. The Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, is a day of fasting, 25 hours from sundown to sundown, a time usually communities are together with many prayer services and reflective time. And this year, like so many other communities of faith, we had to get creative in the ways that we were together, a lot of it online, some of it in our congregation we were also able to do outdoors. One of the festivals that many people from the outside think is a major festival of Judaism, but actually for us is considered a minor festival, is the festival of Hanukkah. A lot of people think it's a really big one because it comes in December, and so there's a lot of assumptions sort of made about its connection to Christmas time. Certainly it is a festival of lights. It is about hope in dark times, but it's considered a minor festival for a couple of reasons. We have biblically commanded festivals in which all of those festivals we are meant to abstain from work. Those are days that traditionally children would take off from school. People are meant to take off from work so that they can be in worship and in community. Hanukkah is not one of those days. And in fact, the story of Hanukkah, which is the story of a group called the Maccabees, who fought back against Syrian Greeks, who took over Jerusalem and rededicated the temple to Zeus and defiled it. They fought guerrilla warfare and they managed to take back control of Jerusalem and rededicate the temple. That story is not in the Hebrew canon. It's not in the Tanakh. It's in the books of Maccabees, which are in a collection known as the Apocrypha, that is not in our official canonized Bible. But yet it is a very popular festival. And just as I know our Christians have had to grapple with the commercialization of Christmas, so have we with Hanukkah, with children expecting gifts, sometimes one for each of the 8 nights of the festival. But the ritual is primarily one of just lighting the Hanukkah menorah at night, saying some blessings and singing some songs and eating some fried foods. That's really it. The other biggie to mention is Passover. Passover is one of the most celebrated holidays in the Jewish calendar among Jews, even more so than Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Passover, as it evolved, is also something that's a home-based ritual in which we have a special festival meal. But before that, we have a ritual Seder, which means order. It's a ritual of words and readings and symbolic foods that all represent different things. What I have here is a picture of a Seder plate with those symbolic foods. And the picture that you see is actually of a group of soldiers, I think in Iraq, who are celebrating Passover. So important it is that wherever you are, people try and make a way to celebrate the Passover Seder. The Passover Seder was designed by rabbis really during the Roman era. And so the idea of the foods and the symbolic foods and some of the rituals of demonstrating our freedom, we're meant to lean back and relax, we're meant to have 4 cups of wine. A lot of that was based on Roman banquets of the time, and also the style of the ritual and the conversation in the book we use called a Haggadah is based on the Greek symposium, where questions are asked and lots of imaginative answers are given. Okay, I have 1 minute to give you a little bit of a geography lesson. I'm not going to have time to give you much of a history lesson. This is the ancient Near East, and in the ancient Near East, you can see that we start off Ur of the Chaldeans over here is where Abraham is meant to have come from. There's travel in this part of the world, and this over here is the land of Canaan that eventually becomes the land of Israel. We were settled there as tribes. We were brought together under a kingdom, and first of all King Saul, then King David, then King Solomon, and then King Solomon's sons fought and split the kingdom into the north and the south. The North Kingdom actually fell to larger empires in 722, and the Southern Kingdom, the first temple was destroyed in 586, and the leaders were sent into exile into Babylonia. But 70 years later, they were allowed by the Persians to come back and rebuild Jerusalem and rebuild the temple. And then we were there through till the Roman period, when the Second Temple was destroyed in 70. At that point, we begin what's known as the diaspora. There were already Jews who had left and spread from the time in Babylonia in 586 BCE, but you can see that we end up spread all over the world here over the first couple of centuries. However, our history in Europe is one where we settle for periods of time, but a lot of anti-Semitism, attacks on Jewish communities, and times when we are no longer convenient to the powers that be lead to expulsions. And so we become a wandering people. There's always a small presence that stays in Jerusalem or in Sfat, in the north of Israel, and over those centuries, different empires come in and take control of that land. So we never completely lost being a presence there, but we end up all over the world. And the idea of there being these waves of attacks is perhaps most horrifically epitomized by the Holocaust, the direct attempt to annihilate all of the Jews of Europe by Hitler and the Nazis. This map just shows you some of the numbers. In this part of Eastern Europe, over 4.5 million were murdered, and then there are numbers from all of the other countries in Europe where they were able to take control. The estimate, although the number is not truly known, is about 6 million Jews, along with gypsies and gays and lesbians and political prisoners and others who were targeted, people with disabilities who were targeted for murder by the Nazis. Partly as a result of that, but actually with a history that goes back much, much earlier, there is a push that had started in the late 1800s because of attacks called pogroms on Jews in Europe to push for a homeland. This is the era of nationalism and national desires, and a number of nation states were born right after World War II as lands that had previously been under older empires got divided, and so out of this comes the United Nations vote that established a modern state of Israel in 1948, a very important date for the Jewish community. We know that this remains something where the work is unfinished because of the need to continue to seek out a solution for Palestinian people. But this became very important because it was the first time we had a land, first of all, that took us back to our tribal roots, where we had started, but also a nation state where we would not be kicked out or persecuted by the nation, because it would be a Jewish nation, the only one in the world. So that's where I am going to stop talking. I almost did it in half an hour, and we have about 12 minutes. So I am going to invite people. You can put something in the chat and I can try and follow it, or you can unmute and ask a question, and I will see how many we can get to in the time that we have. Very quiet. I can't see everyone right now on my screen, so if someone's raising a hand waiting to be called upon, you just have to unmute yourself. Okay, we have a question. When does the leap month fall in the calendar? It falls in the month of, it's right before springtime. So it's the month is called Adar, and we Jews were very original in what we called the leap month. When there's a leap year, we have an Adar 1 and we have an Adar 2. Adar is usually the festival of Purim, which is kind of like described as Jewish Mardi Gras. We read the book of Esther, but it's like a crazy upside down holiday. And it really is kind of, it's like that, you know, when we're all going stir crazy and we're waiting for springtime and we're sick of winter, it's that kind of energy. And that festival gets pushed off to the second Adar when we have a leap year. Are there Jewish festivals where you do not greet happy? Right, yeah, Yom Kippur. Would be one of them. You don't wish people a happy Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. There are things you will wish people, Gamar Chatima Tova, may you be sealed for a good year in the year ahead, is what we often say, or still as a continuation, we might say Shana Tova, good year, which is how we greet people for the new year. There are other fast days in more traditional branches of Judaism. There are more fast days, but the other most significant one usually falls in August, the middle of the summer. Tisha B'Av is another fast day, which is a day when all of the tragedies that have befallen us over the centuries are remembered, starting with the destructions of the first and second temple. That's another fast day where we wouldn't wish each other a happy anything. Okay. Do many Jewish families in the US still put up their own sukkah? It depends on where you are in the community. I know several of our community have, but probably not the majority. Most years we have put up a sukkah at the synagogue, and our congregation takes part in the mitzvah by helping to put it up, helping to bring it down, and celebrating there. I think what's happened is that as Jewish communities, let's just take this country, have become more geographically dispersed, so that we don't live close to our own relatives, and we are many of us, like in an area like this, like Westborough, we're a tiny percentage of the town, so we're pretty dispersed. The synagogue has become a very central gathering place for Jewish ritual and community experience, much more so than perhaps it was historically, where many of our rituals and our observances would have taken place in the home space, but where people's extended families would all live close by and they would come together. And then over really since Jews moved out to the suburbs in the sort of 1950s and 60s, the synagogue became a much more significant gathering place that replicates a lot of the rituals that people would have done at home. No, the cap I'm wearing is not related to Sukkah, although I did choose it with kind of nature themes in mind. The kippah, or in Yiddish yarmulke, the head covering, which is an optional item to wear in our branch of Judaism, which is on the liberal end. We don't require people to wear ritual garb, but you can if you wish. It's simply a reminder that there is a higher power above us, and they come in many different designs. This is a kind of what's called a bukharan, more from the Eastern traditions of our people, but there are some which are just small, some which are knitted, some which are suede, and Suri and I have an enormous collection because we like everything to match or pick up on the seasons. What are the 3 most important messages conveyed by Torah to humans? Oh my gosh. Well, definitely the biggest one is the one that we find across multiple traditions. Love your neighbor as yourself. That is the central guide. Hillel, one of our great early rabbis, says, you know, if you learn that, then everything else is commentary. That would be the central one. I think that, you know, derived from our tradition is, you know, that there is just one God. And I don't know if I chose another primary, you know, I think less about the specifics of Torah and a little bit more of the voice of the prophets. One of the lines most repeated in Torah actually is to remember that to treat the stranger with respect, to treat the stranger equally and fairly, because we were once strangers in Egypt. That is repeated multiple times, that through our experience of having been slaves, that's a core part of our narrative, that we should be very thoughtful as to how we treat others. Is it a community event to build the sukkah? Yeah, I mean, even in somebody's house, you kind of need a few people to put one up. But in our congregation, we have one that requires several hands, and we invite kids to come and help. Often in a normal year, Nurse Farm in town provides corn stalks that are used to decorate the sides and the roof of the sukkah. And so we have kids help. In religious school, they make decorations. We have some plastic fruit that we hang up here every year, just because it's much easier than dealing with the type that rots on top of you over the week, or that attracts all the animals that live in the woods right behind us here. Yeah, our kids in a normal year would have made all kinds of decorations in religious school to hang in the sukkah. So it's very much a community activity. Mark, I think my time is up. We need to hand over to you if we want to try and stay on track. Is that correct?
I guess so. Now let me, okay, so, how do I begin? Oh, share my screen. Here we go. So hello, everybody. I'm going to be doing a quick introduction of our organization, Central Mass Connections and Faith. And then we'll be sharing something, a beautiful video that someone in our organization has created on her own that is really quite amazing.
Mark,
so let me start.
Sorry to interrupt you. Before you do that, I just want to take this moment. While Mark is taking over for the next few minutes, I am going to be starting to organize breakout rooms for the facilitated conversations that take place in the second half of our program, which is a wonderful opportunity to share experiences and stories and get to know people of different backgrounds. However, in order for me to do this efficiently, if you're not planning to stay for the breakout room conversation, we say thank you for joining us, and we would ask you to sign off now so that I only put people into the breakout rooms who are going to be part of those conversations.
Whoa, Rachel, it's saying to me, screen sharing has failed to start. Please try again later.
Try again.
Why would it do that?
I don't know.
Why would it do that? Let me see something here. Share.
There you go.
Okay. Okay. So hi, everybody. About 3.5 years ago, Rabbi asked me to help. She had created an interfaith organization in Bridgeport when she was the assistant rabbi. And she asked if I might help her do something similar here. And that was the beginning of something we have named Central Mass Connections and Faith. This was the request that she made. If you're not going to stay, please sign out now, but she already said it. We had gone along for a couple of years, just sort of building and learning, and one of our members said, we really need a strategic vision for this organization. And that's work that I had done quite a bit in business in my work in consulting. And there are 2 of 4 elements of a strategic vision. One is called the core purpose, and the other is called core values. And together they make what's called the core ideology. And we had a team, a wonderful team, that worked for quite a while to come up with really what's not that many words, but have a lot of meaning. So our core purpose is, what is that fundamental reason that we exist? And for us, it's to build bridges and friendships across cultures. And hopefully you're getting somewhat of a feel for that tonight. Core values, I think there are 4, but I may be wrong, there may be 5. 1 is respect, 2 is curiosity. One of the things we try to stimulate is learning about each other, asking questions about each other, and not just necessarily when we're gathered for an event. Rabbi said at the first event that we hosted, What I'm looking for is that when some of you from different faiths in different towns maybe run into each other at BJ's or Ocean State Job Lot, and you just stop and you just chat for a while because you like each other and you know each other. And that curiosity about each other. Inclusivity, everybody belongs, everybody. And lastly, open-mindedness. And we talk about that quite a bit. So I mentioned that we have this member, Shayla Elagrus, who has joined us over the last couple of years, and she's just been wonderful. And she reached out to me a couple of months ago because, and I'll read this to you, in the midst of this worldwide pandemic, as she found solace in prayer and music, an idea occurred to her, and it really did. Why not create a video of various faith prayer songs in order to bring peace, harmony, and comfort together? Thus, the quest for singers began, and she really screened a lot of different songs. And out of many videos from as far away as India, Australia, and Africa, she picked these final ones from Massachusetts and Kenya. Now, they're not professionally recorded. The people who sing them aren't professionals. They're participants in different religious communities. And so I'm going to play it for you now.
I'm on. Good.
बांसुरी तुम कौन गुमान भरी बांसुरी तुम कौन गुमान भरी सोने की नाही रुपए की नाही सोने की नाही रुपए की नाही नाही रतन जड़ी बांसुरी तुम कौन गुमान भरी बांसुरी जात सिफत तेरी सबको जानत 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 मधुबन की लकड़ी बांसुरी तुम कौन गुमान भरी बांसुरी क्यारी भयो जो हरि मुख लागी 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 बाजत विरह भरी बांसुरी तुम कौन गुमान भरी बांसुरी Eli, Eli, shelo yigamer leolam. Hachol v'hayam rishru shel hamayim berak hashamayim tfilat hadam hachol v'hayam rishru shel hamayim berak hashamayim tfilat hadam. My God, we pray that these things never end. The sand and the sea, the waves on the water, the crash of the heavens, the prayers of our hearts. Eli, Eli, shelo yigamer leolam.
Oh Lord my God, when I in awesome wonder consider all the works thy hands have made, I see the
سلام 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 حاز إبراهيم نعمة الإيمان وعيسى الرحيم من روح الرحمن وموسى الكليم كلم الديان وطه ومحمد يا حبيب الله سلام سلام أنبياء الله دعاة السلام لعباد الله سلام 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 أنبياء الله دعاة السلام لعباد الله هذا إبراهيم نعمة الإيمان وموسى الكليم كلم الديان وعيسى الرحيم من روح الرحمن وعيسى الرحيم من روح الرحمن
Spirit of life, come unto me, sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion, blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
Aman, can you give me back the screen?
Yeah, just
We can
one
hear
second.
you, Mark. That's good.
Yeah. Yeah, if you can hand it back to me. Can people see my screen? No.
No. Mark, I'm going to suggest
No.
that we move into breakout rooms because they're ready to go.
Yeah.
And our facilitators have all had some experience, so they can go over some basic ground rules as they kick off their breakout rooms.
Yep.
So
Sorry.
thank you. The music video gave me a chance to sort and organize everyone into groups. I have privately messaged some of our facilitators who are going to become participants. And if you didn't get a private message chat from me, then facilitators, you are still facilitating and co-facilitating. So we're going to send everybody into breakout rooms. Our facilitators have a set of questions. So everyone will be guided through the same themes of conversation this evening. And we will come back together again at 9:15, just for 2 or 3 minutes to be back together for a closing song and a closing of our evening. So we have about 45 minutes of conversation time. So I'm sending you on your way. Just accept when you see you are sent into a breakout room.